Hello, Steve, Hobo with Wood, coming at you again. So, there's been a lot of conversation going back and forth in the comments about working with the my tongue twister, the clear acrylic, engraving clear acrylic with the 10-watt xTool. I have had some better than average success with doing that, but it had been a while since I did it. There isn't a video that I produced several weeks ago about the LED night lights, and I'll put a link to that in the comments. But I didn't share any of my settings because at that time, I'm still against the idea of people taking my settings and thinking they're going to work for them, uh, because my same settings don't always work for me. So I am going to, though, give you all of the settings and show you what all I've went through to get to these settings to produce what I think is my finest LED acrylic nightlight yet. This was pretty amazing. I actually was able to do a layered engraving in the acrylic and produced. Let's see here. I've got one, two, three, probably 4 different layers in this one LED acrylic engraving, and you'll have to hang around to see that. It's really impressive, and I'm going to show you the complete project and the entire settings, and you can cross your fingers and see how well that works for you. But I'm going to show you the test that I did in order for me to be able to come to this final output. So let's jump in here and to Lightburn, and actually, go to Lightburn first, and I'll show you the actual test. All right, if you go into Lightburn and you come up here to your laser tools and your material test, Lightburn has a built-in material test generator, and you can set it up and edit it as you like. Now, I set up one today for a crosshatch test doing the clear acrylic. I don't know why I have such a hard time with that. I don't know if it's just, I don't know, but that ties me up every time. Clear acrylic. But you can set in here your speeds, how many different rows and columns you want to do, 10 by 10, or if you want to do 5 by 5. Change your speed and your power, your minimum and maximum speeds, and your minimum maximum power. And then it will do a burn like this. You've seen these test patterns, I'm sure. But I did 1, 2, 3, 4. I did 4 different test patterns today, and I'm going to show pictures of all those and the outcomes. And what was really surprising was the reason I said that my settings don't always work for me. The settings that I used when I did the LED nightlight video number 1, those settings didn't work today. It was too much power. And I think what happened was during those first LEDs I was doing, that was just prior to my focus lens or my lens on my laser cracking and completely putting the laser out of business. But I think that was probably already beginning to have a halo on it, and not cracked yet, but getting close. So that allowed some muting of the laser. So those powers and settings worked then, but they didn't work today. It was too much power. So, but 5 tests later, I come up with a pretty decent set of parameters and grids, and I came up with a really, really, really nice output. But let's see. This was the first test I did. And then let's minimize. I say, okay, go away, close. So, and I'm, maybe pause it here and take a snapshot or a screenshot. But that was the first test. And then the second test. Now, the first test I did with the crosshatch in the parameters. Now, I'll show you that in a minute. But this one was not a crosshatch. They were both single pass tests, except technically the crosshatch to me is a double pass because it's passing horizontally and then vertically. But they were both done at 0.08. Take you a snapshot or screenshot of that. Now, how you change those crosshatch window tools. There we go. You go into material test, you come down here to edit material. And here you can tell it crosshatch or not. Your speeds and your power are going to be controlled by the material test generator. So you don't have to mess with that. But you can change it if you want it on bidirectional or crosshatch. And on my first test, the reason I did it on crosshatch is because I did it at relatively lower powers, and I wanted that crosshatch to be able to do a little work and then come back and do a little bit more work. At least that was the theory. Because if you've done any of this clear acrylic, you're probably familiar with the Snap, Crackle, Pop, the Rice Krispie candy, or Rice Krispie treats in the cereal. If you start hearing Snap, Crackle, Pop in your acrylic, it's too late. Because once it snaps, crackles, well, now it's cracked the acrylic. And if it's not through burning in that area, once that acrylic cracks and it distorts, it will prevent the laser from doing any more etching or engraving in that area because that crack will refract the laser. So it takes some time to really dial this in. So I'm going to, I don't think this is going to show very well on here, but hand out of the way, maybe, there we go, get that background back there. Those were the first two tests that I did, and all of the black, that's just where it just snapped, crackled, and popped, and I just had the heat, the power way too high. Try it. This is really hard to. I'm going to show you these in the stand in a minute, but so one piece of test material down. Then I did another panel, and this one I did with two test pattern burns here and here, and then this was where I used the successful settings I'd used in the past, and this actually burned and cracked the acrylic, and then this one was a failure. So second piece of test material down. But this second one, the test burns that I did, those were 10 by 10, and I did them relatively small so I can get them both on here. These gave me some valuable information on what burns worked for me, what power and what speeds worked for me. And we're going to see all that in just a second when we get to this elaborate burn that I did, and it was quite successful. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat tonight. All right, so close. All right, so you need to be willing to sacrifice that test burn, a piece of acrylic for those test burns. Now, show you one other thing real quick too. On that material test, this height and width at 5 millimeters, that's the actual square that it's going to burn in the test. These were 5 millimeter test burns, and two test burns took up an entire 140 millimeters or 14 centimeters. But this one, I went in here and changed it from 5 millimeters to 3 millimeters, and I was able to get, I could have gotten probably 6 on here if I wanted to, but one piece of acrylic was able to produce, really good results and good tests. So you can change the size of that and get a lot of test on one piece. All right, now on my technique and I was going to do this today in the shop, and I've got some pictures that I will put in here, I hope. But if you have the honeycomb that came with or from xTool, it came with a flat piece of steel of some type that goes under your honeycomb typically to prevent any burn through. But when I'm burning my clear acrylic, I take the piece of sheet metal or steel that's normally face down, I take it out, I spray it with Rust-Oleum filler primer. It's dry, put it down, then I put my clear acrylic, I put it down and engrave my image without prepping that clear acrylic in any way. I remove any of the protective film off of it, make sure that it's clean, and just lay it right on the metal and do my burn. And there's something about, I did several tests today. If you've watched my test with the masking tape and how successful I was with engraving glass with masking tape, I thought maybe I could combine the two techniques and use masking tape with the clear acrylic and get a better or different result, but I got nothing. When I use the masking tape on the top surface of the clear acrylic or on the bottom of the clear acrylic, there was no image in the acrylic whatsoever. So that technique doesn't transfer from glass to clear acrylic. They're both clear medias, and that laser shoots right through it. But there's something about that laser hitting the Rust-Oleum primer that's on that steel bed that's what reacts, because the engraving takes place at the reaction between the primer and the acrylic. It's completely smooth on the surface. So whenever you're focusing it, I had initially tried to get my focus point, what would technically be out of focus on the clear acrylic. We're sitting here, here's the steel. Well, if this is where the engraving's taking place, I wasn't focusing here. I focused deeper, close as I could get to this acrylic, because the engraving action was taking place down here below the acrylic. So keep that in mind when you do set up your focus as well. So Rust-Oleum filler primer. I used gray. I don't know that it would matter. And I used the filler primer because paint might work, but paint is going to be a mess to clean up, and then I can reuse this steel over and over and over. Unlike a piece of wasteboard, once you burn enough images in it, well, you just can't really use it for much more for as far as putting templates. When those burns in that wood is permanent. Well, on this steel with the primer, it'll burn an image into that primer on that steel. But then I just take my 320 sandpaper after I'm through, or I've filled up that entire work bed, and just sand it smooth and clean again, spray more primer on it, and it's ready for the next set of burns. So it's really an efficient way to make the burn, and an inexpensive way, because you're not going through material as far as wasteboards. It's the same piece every time. Okay, what else? All right, so the masking tape didn't work, forward or back. You need your Rust-Oleum filler primer, and let's get in here to the burn that I designed. All right. So open Baby Yoda. All right. So this is the image. The tool line is the size of my acrylic. But this is the image that I put out there. And I'm going to move this down out of the way. And I'm going to zoom in here for you to see all these. But because they're on multiple paths, it doesn't really tell you a whole lot, does it? Okay. So let's open up the first one here and take a look. Now, the black layer you can't see right now. And it's because of the way I've got the layers built. But let's do this. I'm going to do this, go here. I'm going to change this to a line for right now. And now you can see. All right, so the black layer is facial features, eyes and facial features. And I've got it on its, those items are on that layer, and it's in a fill and in a line after fill. The fill is at 20 millimeters a second at 25.6% power. Why 25.6? Because that's what the test I ran automatically generated, and it was successful and it worked. So I took those numbers exactly from my test and plugged them in here, and it was successful. You're gonna like this. 25.6% power, bidirectional fill, no crosshatch, but it does have a line after fill, and I did it at the exact same speed and power. 20 millimeters a second, 25.6% power. Now that's the first layer. The second layer was all of his fur. I'm guessing that's fur on his garment. And it was done at 17%, or both 17 millimeters a second and 17% power. However, where this first layer was bidirectional, no crosshatch, the second layer, I did it much lower speed and much lower power, but I did it on a crosshatch. So like I said, that crosshatch, you're essentially getting two burns in that same layer. And if I had tried to do those two burns at the higher temperatures, it would have been too much for the acrylic and snap, crackle, pop. But not only did I change the powers and add the crosshatch, this was done at 20, 25, 6, bidirectional, and a line interval of a 0.08. So I changed the line interval to a 0.3 on the fur. So that's going to give a really open lines per inch. So we're going to change the power at which it's being burnt, and we're also changing the texture that that laser is going to generate in that, and how wide the gap is between each burn. And it's not only here, but it's also here. So it's giving you this right here, this crosshatch look in the engrave. Line 3 is I have it in a complete fill. We're going to put it back to fill. And that's going to cover up the others you can't see. But that's okay, because that's showing you it's doing that complete burn in that whole area. Go back here where we can see it again for you. All right, so that's a fill, but it's also a line. So it's a line after fill. I did this one at 20 millimeters a second and only 17.8% power. Bidirectional, 0.08 again, but no crosshatch. So I'm 0.08 just like I was on the first layer, but it's at a lower power. So that's going to be a lighter engrave. It's going to have different contrast. Then my line after fill, same thing, 20 and 17.8. Then the next layer are the word Star Wars. and that's back to the 20, 25.6, just like layer 1 there, 20 and 25.6. However, what do we do different? It is a fill and a line after fill. It's 0.08. And all right, so that one I did trying to get the most burn as possible, to clear as to engrave as much of that as possible, and as dark, or technically as bright as it could be whenever the lights turned on. And then lastly was the little insert of his ears. That one was done at a much higher speed, 70 millimeters a second, but only at 17.8% power. And it was a line after fill. The line after fill was done back at the regular 20 millimeters a second and 25.6. Now, all of this is, and you guys, of course, you know, you can pause, back up, and go see this. But all of this to accomplish it involved burn on the acrylic. In fact, let's take a look here, the preview on this. In fact, let's just show you how this was going to come into be here. All right, maximize you, get me down out of the way. All right, there we go. This will show you the crosshatch. You can see it there in the garments, and then also up here, this was done on a different line interval. So as that began to, and this feel, that's fine. The crosshatch was already there and had given a certain type of look and a certain burn. Then the fill come back in and just burn the entire image. But we still had the contrast, because now that's just a burn on top of the contrast. And then the Star Wars was done with just a bidirectional fill to fill it up. All right, so now let's show you some pictures and some images and some up-close stills of these results. I was extremely happy with this. This was, the one thing you might have seen, but I didn't point it out, so let's look at that again. That preview, it's an hour and 15 minutes for that burn, and it was every bit of that. So that was the longest burn that I've ever done in the clear acrylic. All of my other clear acrylic burns were just a nice, simple vector image with no texture, it was just a silhouette, and burn it, and it looked fine. But here I wanted to create more. I wanted to do more with the laser other than just put a plain, flat, monotone image on there. And this turned out pretty nice. But do you want to spend an hour and 15 minutes to do one burn on one piece of acrylic? Depends how nice of a project you want to turn out. So let's take a look at what we got. Okay, so this is the first piece that I did the test burns on. And this was the very first piece that I tried to do an image on. And you can barely see there make out the wheel on a car. That was where I tried to engrave an image of my vehicle and failed pretty miserably. So I was able to use this as a test piece, and all that snap, crackle, pop you guys are hearing whenever you're trying to burn, you recognize that look right there. And turn it on, you can really see. Let's see y'all. So all that was overpower, snapped and cracked Had some decent burns up there, but first test, took what I learned from there and did a second test. Actually, that was 1, 2. This is 3, 4, 5, 6 tests total. There's 4 on this piece alone. So this test here was the test I did with the Crosshatch, and what I found informative and surprising is, if you look there at the lowest power and the highest speed, you only got a little bit of burn in the middle of that rectangle, and you can see that image actually throughout, 3 or 4 layers there. It's like as you come down, now you get a more consistent burn. But had it not been for the Crosshatch, it wouldn't have looked that nice. But you still got too much power even with the Crosshatch over here. Got a lot of cracking going on. So there's the sweet spots right in there. And this test was done at a 10 millimeters a second up to 30 millimeters a second, and 15% power up to 35% power with a Crosshatch. So I used that as a guide. And then down here, this was not with the Crosshatch. So since it was only doing one pass, this was done with higher powers and faster speeds. So it was 10 millimeters a second up to 50 millimeters a second, and 10 up to 80% power. And you can see all the damage that was done there. And then it fades away as the power was reduced. In fact, there was nothing produced at 10% power at any speed on here. But at 17.8, you can see it begin to fade away. And it got narrower and narrower. It's almost as if the center part of that square, well, that really just don't make no sense to me. It's like as the laser, the longer it burnt, by the time it got to the middle, it was hot enough. I don't know. It's just weird how it did that, because it's burning. The laser's moving left or right. It's strange, that output, but it was knowledge. So then I took and used the settings that I had success with. I had great success with 33.3 speed and 75% power, but that was when I had the failing lens, because if you notice here, I had a failure here. It was too much power. Then I tried doing the Crosshatch at a 15-15, and there was a combination on this failure of the power and the settings, and also you notice that it's pretty dark on the T, but then by the time we get down here, it's all faded away. Well, that was a problem with the primer area on the steel. It did not have a good coat of primer there, so that shows you that the primer is what's making that etching take place. And what is kind of interesting is these two tests were burnt at the same time using the exact same fonts. So this was not a bold or a larger font than this. It's just that's how much etching and damage that the laser did to that acrylic compared to that low power there. Alright, now it's time for the reveal. If you're still watching, hopefully you find this as nice as I did. In fact, I'm going to turn the lights out. So thank you for hanging around and watching. This was a longer video, but there was a lot of information there. I learned a lot today. There was 6 test burns I did, 4 or 5, yeah, 6 test burns plus the engrave. But after 6 test burns, to get all that information, I was able to produce what I thought was a pretty impressive piece of acrylic. It was a lengthy burn, but you get out of it what you put into it. You want something that looks, quick, or you want something quick and it's going to look quick and it's going to look cheap. But thank you for watching. If you found this informative, please like and subscribe. And now the one piece of information that I haven't shared to this point that is crucial, the acrylic that I'm using here is 3.5 millimeters thick. That will make a difference in your burn rate and the results that you tried to duplicate or replicate or simulate. You know what do we say about that? I don't guarantee any of it. So 3.5 millimeters I give up. Clear acrylic. I'll get it down. No, I won't. But anyway, thanks again. It's been Steve, Hobo with Wood. We'll see you in the next video.